Hi, I am here with Mila, and we are going to be talking about all things instructors, about becoming an instructor, the journey of it, and how we have found our
Mm.
path and what's helped us along the way. And we'd love to share some tips and tools that may just help you to feel more empowered and to find your style in the teaching world. So, welcome, Mila. It's so good to have you in this chat with me.
Thank you, Claudia. I'm really happy to be collabing with you on this and having this conversation for several reasons. One of which is that I've been following you for a while, and I think this program that you're starting to offer really intrigued me because it's everything I felt I needed or wanted when I was starting off. So when you reached out and we talked about sharing a bit of our journey, maybe sharing some tips, lessons learned as well as a new instructor and growing into an instructor. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you and talk more on this topic. So thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and thanks for joining me. Yeah, so we are in the round two, we round two of the Empowered Instructor, and it's now week two. So, yeah, it's a perfect topic to be able to be talking about this, and we're going to be going through 6 points today. And this is going to be helping a lot of new instructors that are still trying to find their way. And, maybe it can help you if you've been an instructor for a while too. The first topic I'd love to talk about is, who do you want to be as an instructor? And when I think back to my journey, I just learned the workouts, and it was hard enough to just try and get to know the sequences. Um, yes, I got a lot of clients and there was a lot of practice. None of my clients really had anything in common other than wanting to move and feel better. But my style came with time. And I wish that I had covered this at the start of my journey, because it really would have helped me to develop so much sooner into explaining how I can help others and who it is I help. So I'd love to hear about how you came about who you'd like to be and what you would describe your style as.
That's a great question. So it all in the very beginning, once I completed my training, I hadn't even considered the thought of who I wanted to be as an instructor. But I had moved cities and I was applying for a job, and there were some interesting opportunities. And I remember this one lady that I spoke with, and she just said to me that you will have to figure out who you are as an instructor, and that will really help you decide where you want to be working with and the type of clients that you're going to get. And initially, that kind of took me from afar because I thought I wanted to be it all. I wanted to be the great fitness Pilates instructor. I wanted to be able to work on helping people get better after an injury, so a bit of rehab work as well. So that to me came with time. And I wish that I had considered or really thought about this more in depth from the very beginning. Why? Because you find yourself exhausting trying to fulfill every type of instructor that there is, and you compare yourself to the different types of instructors.
Mm.
And that can be very exhausting and at times really demotivating because you can't please everyone. So when you're comparing yourself to the best fitness Pilates instructor, maybe you're coming short because you're not dedicating all your work to becoming, a really good high energy, kind of just Pilates fit type of classes. And at the same time, if you're focusing on maybe being a little bit more into rehab or post-injury work, then you can't be that hardcore fitness instructor because the energy of the one is different to the energy of the other. And unfortunately, that I learned with time. When you're trying to, I have an example of having a bit of a fitness class and then having a rehab client after. And the energy from my fitness, my more strong class that I brought into my more rehab client actually led the client to want to stop the class 15 or 20 minutes before the end, because the intensity of the class that I was trying to fulfill, or the hype that I was trying to bring into that class, did not work at all. And that was a hard blow for me, especially as a newbie instructor, to have a client being like, okay, no, I think this is it. And that is something where I quickly kind of started to think, okay, there is a huge difference between the two. And you can't be the best at everything. You can be good in a lot of things and be specialized in one versus the other. And I took a step back where I actually had to think about, where do I really want to focus my 100% energy? So where do I want to be as an instructor versus, the additional classes that I want to give in order for my career to progress, or in order to, fulfill a little bit more of the market gap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And I think being everything to everybody is so common. We all wanted, like, that was me at the start, especially when I started my business. Even as an instructor, I just wanted to help everybody. But our specialties and our personality shines through in a certain way. And it's interesting when you were talking about teaching the hardcore fitness and then the rehab. I talk about transitions in the Empowered Instructor, and having that moment of leaving the room, resetting your energy, and just taking a few breaths, whether it's while washing your hands, just reset in between, so that you're not taking the same energy into the next class. Same with if you were to have a client that might be really emotional, and then you take that into the next class, which is more upbeat. We don't want to be carrying in that energy in between the sessions. And I think starting as an instructor, when you have back-to-back sessions, it's really tricky to do that, but it is so important to try and create that barrier between the sessions, between the clients, and that way it also helps you to not feel as drained at the end of the day. Because I do think, like, when you're teaching 9 hours a day, if you're teaching back-to-back sessions, it's so tricky to not feel drained, don't you think?
Absolutely. And even so, with my experience, I did choose to transition and become more into the helping people with back pain and some rehab work. Even just taking this direction, I've noticed that client to client, it still changes so much. So that moment that you step back, you take a breath, you sometimes just go to the bathroom to wash your hands, just to sort of, I don't know, feel cold water on your hands, to disconnect a little bit from the energy of one class before the next. Because yes, we learn exercises, but we're dealing with people, and every person is so different. So you want to meet someone where they are. And even someone that you've been training for years can come in one day a little bit more stressed. Being able to match their energy a little bit and help them relax in their space, being, a little bit more calm or a little bit more centered, helping them get to that spot of calmness before they start working out, is so important, because how you teach exercise will depend on the state of the person as well, right? So that disconnect, that moment for yourself, is something that we're not taught. So in my training, I remember we were taught exercises, we had to know the repertoire, which was great, even how to select exercise for the right person. But there's this aspect of needing to reconnect also with yourself, because you have to feel comfortable and calm before you come to a new client. And it doesn't seem like much until you're doing like 5 hours back to back, and you realize that at the end of the day, at the end of like 5 hours of teaching, you can be exhausted. And if you didn't connect with a client, if you didn't help them, you also feel very unfulfilled. And that can be also a pretty horrible feeling, because I think a lot of us instructors enter this wanting to help someone, whether it's somebody more fitness, want to help someone feel strong, or wanting to help someone in more rehab kind of work. There is a sense of fulfillment in how successful each class goes. And that is your 5 hours nonstop. You don't come out of a class and say, "Ooh, 20 minutes into a class, that was a little stressful. I'm going to go grab a coffee, go chat with my friend, and I'll get back to this." It doesn't work like that. So you have those moments, and you really do have, just like on the hour, those 5-minute breaks between clients, to really reconnect, center yourself so that you can be your best self for your next client. And I find that that's really important, and something that you mentioned, and myself as well, have learned through trial and error. But so many years later, here we are, and really hope that this can help somebody else starting out.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually started over 20 years ago. But when I first started, it was back to back, and I never took the time to connect with myself. It's really interesting how just how much we ask our clients to connect with their body and with themselves through breath. We forget to breathe ourselves. So it's really important to connect with your breath when you're asking your clients to connect with their breath. And yes, staying grounded and centered within will help you, whether people are stressed or emotional. You're only so much help if you are able to keep your own spiral of energy more balanced. So yeah, it's a really interesting chat. I love this topic. And then we also want to cover, how did you discover your style of teaching?
It was, again, a trial and error in the beginning. I think from the start, I knew I wanted to connect a little more into the rehab side of things. So when I remember applying for jobs when I was in Montreal, I had an opportunity to work at like a high-end, high-paced, more fitness Pilates classes. And they had music, they had like 10 reformers. It was like this upbeat gym, wellness center. And there was another three, which were very rehab centered. And I was just very intrigued. And this is actually one of the ladies, Samia, and I still actually work with her to this day. She's an incredible person, who said to me that I would have to figure out who I am as an instructor in order to make the decision of where I wanted to work. And I think I kind of took I don't want to say it wasn't a leap of faith to go into more rehab, because I was very new to it, but it was just a strong desire that at the time it just feels like the better decision. It feels like it's more aligned. And I knew that working there, I'd be working mainly on my own as an instructor, whereas like the high-end fitness space would be like lots of other instructors, lots of different people. So it would be better for my maybe social life as a newbie in a new city, because I had just moved to Montreal. But something kind of deep inside, I was just really drawn towards Samia and working with her in her more rehab setting. So it was a feeling in the beginning. And as I started working, I absolutely loved it. And I would spend as much time as I could there, learning as much as I could. And then when she connected me with another osteo who I worked with, it just flowed so naturally from there to a point where right now in Geneva, I'm still working in a physio center, And I feel like that was like the ripple in the ocean that started, and it just always flowed that way because the desire and the interest was there from the start, and I followed my gut with how it made me feel, because I felt more fulfilled. So I dedicated more and more time to it. And in the end, it just went from there.
Yeah. And I guess
Yeah.
when you are connected to it and it just feels more like something that resonates with you, it doesn't feel like work because you just constantly feel
That's
like
true.
you are doing something you love.
Yeah.
I
I haven't asked for you. I would love to hear a little bit more about your style and how you got there as well.
Yeah, so my mentor was actually taught by Romana, who was married to Joseph Pilates. And so that was the more classical style of Pilates, very controlled and very strict. And there weren't many modifications. This is the program and that's how we go. Which I absolutely love because the training was very strict in its way that our teaching method and the practical side of it was amazing. We could only teach once we really knew what we were doing. And then over the years, I then studied to be a personal trainer, and I used some of the knowledge from that. And then I also did a yoga instructor course, which that started to introduce me more into the energy side of things. And it's helped me to understand that there are different energy zones in our body and different workouts that can have an effect on different emotions. So that's when the more energetic side was born for me. And then I did my clinical Pilates diploma, which helped me with the rehab side and the more gentle practice of how to go deeper with your clients and really understanding the body in a whole different way, to the point where I was like, oh, so stretching doesn't quite give you what you need. So I love calling it, you need to give the muscle a cuddle with some strength work and mobility, not stretch. And it's just like my style was born through different courses. And my business has evolved through the different clients that I've had and the different studios that I've had. So I started in a fully equipped studio. And then when I started my own business, it was a mat Pilates studio. And it was just upstairs from a life-saving club. And so there was lots of sand everywhere, but it was a great place to start. And it just depended what I was teaching with, where I was teaching, and who I was teaching. So yeah, it's evolved. And I think it's just a continuous evolution. But the more I have taught, the more in touch I have become with a very gentle approach, but creating a foundation gently and correctly, and then starting to build. So yeah, the communication side of things is really important, so which we'll discuss at another stage. But yeah, just trying to cover, even if I've got an athlete in front of me, because I've taught pro athletes, trying to explain that there is the slower side that is so much more juicy than just smashing the body. So yeah, that's how my style was born. And yeah, I absolutely love rehab because it's something that you see immediate results with. You see the client barely walk in, and then a week or two later with corrective work, you see them just flourish. And that's my favorite part, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that because It's always interesting when people that have never tried Pilates are open to it, and then they try something that they really don't believe will give them benefit to some extent because it looks overly simplistic.
Yeah.
But then when they start seeing that progression happen, and when, you know, the ball starts rolling, when there's that connection, it's really wonderful how, I don't want to say fast the rehab, or, you know, you can reduce amount of pain in someone's body, but it happens relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
very interesting. And having, you know, talk about this and the style of an instructor, it's, at least for me, it's very interesting or important to also point out that there is no right or wrong style to an instructor. You know, just because you and I focus a little bit on in one direction, you know, that life has taken us this way, doesn't mean when, for example, when I'm more interested in going and like breaking some sweat, I actually still love going to Pilates classes. I find, you know, really great, strong Pilates instructor that will teach a great fitness class, because fitness with Pilates in mind is just also like a functional way to do training. So that is fantastic as well, you know. And as an instructor, once you start to, I think, identify where your strengths or interests are, you have to, I think, pursue them, because you'll be the best at what interests you and where you feel like you're bringing the most amount of value. And even in like a fitness setting, that is so beneficial, because at some point, it is good to break sweat. It is good to go to a nice, strong class. And I've seen these instructors online, in person, where it's a really good, like strong Pilates workout. And I think that's really fantastic as well, because it's functional training in a really fun way, because on reform or mat, Pilates can be a lot of fun. And I think that is also a great direction for someone to take without hesitation.
Yeah, it's such a good, I'm so happy you brought that up, because yes, it's not just about rehab. It's about whatever resonates with you. I absolutely love running. I love keeping my body guessing. I'm just currently helping a lot of clients with rehab and reconnecting with their bodies when they're feeling so disconnected. So, yeah, there's no right or wrong, and it keeps it interesting. It depends on what courses you do and how that starts to steer you in a different path. Another thing I'd love to discuss is the ideal clients. How do you find your ideal clients, and what is an ideal client? Would you like to start with that?
Sure. That's a good and a tough question as
Yeah.
well. Because I feel that in order to find your ideal client, you have to know who you are. Because how do you know who your ideal client is without understanding what you offer?
Yeah.
And that's why I love, like, the previous question, I think, leads directly into this one. So for me, my ideal client, it happened to be, and it still is, somebody with, you know, back pain. So, or some sort of injury or specific condition that they want to be working or addressing on. And it's your setup, it's your setting, it's where you are. That is why I think I've worked in osteo studios, and I currently work in a physio studio, because the kind of clientele that comes in there would be the one that would most benefit from my classes. So for me, it was a matter of being where I would be seen more for what I offer. And I was working in a more a fitness place before. I was kind of doing the two. And yes, as a Pilates studio or a Pilates instructor in a studio, somebody will always approach you when they're looking for more, you know, functional, soft, detailed work. But the majority of your clients, I think, will come from where you're a peer for them. So being in a physio center, I know that people that come in and see the physios, they're walking past me all the time. They see what I'm doing with my clients. But again, if I was interested in being more fitness, a more high-paced offering high-paced classes, I would be in the wrong place, and the wrong type of clientele would be looking at me. So I think where you are matters. And as I think that's actually a really great point, is you have to be picky as an instructor where you choose to work, because
Yes.
that is important. You are value added to the studio where you are. So you have to consider for yourself and evaluate your options and go for what feels right to you. You're not doing no one's doing you favors. You're actually offering value when you come somewhere. So be picky, go for where you're most comfortable and confident at. For myself,
Yeah.
at least. How about your experience?
Yeah, that is so true. And it's really interesting that you mentioned that you need to be picky, because even if you are working for people, you are still your own brand. And you still have your own values, your beliefs of how you teach, what you share. And if you are in a place where they don't maybe have the same kind of beliefs or values, it's going to stand out when you're
Yeah.
teaching. And those clients, it's going to be very draining for you to try and be someone that you don't really resonate with. So I love that pickiness, especially now with all the studios around the areas. There are so many jobs around. For me, I feel like whatever experiences you've had as an instructor, whatever's brought you to where you are today, and the experiences that you've had in your body to feel in this particular way, that is where your story starts. So looking back at what has shaped your beliefs in how you feel about your body, not saying that everyone's going to feel the same about their body, but things that you've had experience with, you would understand so much more of when you're teaching someone else, because you've felt that. So at the start, if you do have someone that has been through a similar experience, if you have rehab experience behind you, and say, for example, they've hurt their ankle, you hurt your ankle previously, you knew some exercises, but you also know how it felt. That is key. And I've got a download, which we'll mention in a little while, but I love to say in there that your ideal client is you. So look at who you are and how it is you help people, but also what experiences have helped you along the way. And those are the clients to start off with pretty well, because there's less guesswork. You sort of know a little bit about what they're going through. And I think conversation will flow a little bit easier. Not saying that you can only teach those that are like you, but I think looking at your own story and how you got to where you are today is a really important factor in finding how you describe your ideal client.
Actually, that's a very good way of putting it too, because you, right from the start, will not only have a bit of an emotional connection with the client, which is great, but you'll also feel, I think, especially if you're starting off, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable. And when you're a little bit more comfortable, I find you're more you. But something like that, you can get really thrown off balance, because I've had a client who came in and he's like, he told me like his injuries, and then he said, okay, but I did Pilates in the US and it was like really intense and it was like this. So can you make it more like this and more like that? And at the end, you find that you're being thrown off balance, because you know where you can offer value, but you're starting to okay, but what they want, what they don't want. So having, I think, a bit of your own story that you bring into the picture, or at least when you're starting off, to help you build that confidence, helps you to stay more grounded
Yeah.
Because with each client, you can get thrown, at least in my experience, to this day, I can still get thrown a little bit off balance when someone comes in demanding certain things while needing, other things. So kind of exactly having that place where you start helps you, even when you're a little bit disoriented or a little bit taken aback by somebody's energy or somebody's needs, that you can come back and really find yourself again, find that strength and that confidence within yourself, because you have that strong kind of like a tree has roots, so you have those roots of where you're from, and nobody can throw you off balance. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and it's so easy to be thrown off balance, especially when you're new. Even after all these years, you can still get thrown off balance. And we'll cover that in another chat, going deeper into meeting with clients where they are instead of meeting you where you are. So yeah, that's something that we'll touch on now, but we'll go deeper in another chat. So the last thing that I'd love to talk about is special things that you include in your first session with clients. This is something that could excite them and help them to return for more. Also, I find sharing, if there's something in there that excites them, they will talk about it when they go home. They'll talk about it in their coffee with their friends. The word will start spreading about your sessions, and that will then start to naturally bring clients to you. So I'd love to share mine after hearing from you, Mila. I'd love to hear what you do.
I find that sounds like a simple question, but it's actually really complicated. So years later, this is something I'm still practicing. And I have something like I think of as like a bit of a sandwich method. But at the same time, I know that on the day, I'll maybe have to think it through a little bit better, or maybe sometimes I still get thrown off balance when a client comes in and I see that their energy or that their requests are very strong. And I'll give you an example. Because I see a lot of people with back pain, so whenever I see someone, the first thing I do is a full body assessment. But somebody can come in and they're like, oh, I've done Pilates here and here before. And I have like this numbing pain in my fingers sometimes, but I really, really want to do something super intense. So let's go. And for me, that's really not a starting point, especially when they kind of like throw off, like, oh, I have some numbing pain in my hands sometimes, because that to me is okay. We have to assess the neck. We have to assess the spine. What's happening? Is it nerve? My goal is to have their body get better in the long run versus giving them a really fun, sweaty kind of workout, because that's, as we discovered and as we talked about in the first topic, is that's not the direction I took with my training. Even though I can give that kind of class, it's not where I bring value. So I need to find how I can make the client happy, because I would like to see them again, because I really feel that I could help them get better. But at the same time, I need to do all the work that I need to do. And that takes time. Like nobody comes in and leaves 100% better, especially if you're doing an assessment and you're discovering someone who, first of all, should be seeing a physio if they have like numbing pain, but you're trying to also assess the person for yourself and figure out the right exercises for them. The assessment is not the fun bit. And I always try to tell my clients, the first session is always the most boring one. Like, if you're somebody more high paced, my first session is always the most boring one. It gets better, it gets harder with time, but we have to go step by step. So giving that little bit of a precursor to help them understand that this is okay, that the first session is a bit slower, is something that I do. And then I do the assessment. But if I notice that the person is starting to lose interest, first I can carry on. And I know that by the end of the session, I'll be able to maybe give them the right elbow or the right Pilates exercise that they can hopefully do at home if they want to. If they have like 2 minutes every day, I'll say, okay, do this. It's really great. But if I know and I can see that I'm losing their attention, and this does happen, especially with, and at least in my case, in more men or more CrossFit type of clients that I see, I have to try and give them a little bit of what they want somewhere in the session that isn't going to injure them, that is going to stay aligned with what they're there to be doing, and then be able to get back to where I need to go. So, the assessment, a little bit of the boring part, if I see that that's not going too well for them, I'm going to try and add a little bit, something a little bit more intense for them. And then finish up a little bit more on my side of things, trying to get back into the more in-depth work, the more, assessing the one joint, focusing on one joint, because I start there and then I develop, working full body and integrating how the joints work together. But that's why I say the sandwich methods, that I kind of try and start them with a precursor. Then I usually, at least in my case, most of the time, I need to give them what they're there for, and then try to finish up with a little bit more detailed work. And sometimes I will give something a little bit more intense, and I'll figure out, okay, well, even though with this, client who has a little bit in their shoulder, and we did some, knee stretch modification or scooter, which are more of like balance, and they're still difficult work, but they still tensed up and they still got some tension in their upper back. Sometimes what I go back to is actually just trying to release that again. So it's not like a one step forward, one step back, but you're trying to find that middle ground. Because if you're only giving the person what you know is going to, or what you believe is going to give them value, and they don't come back, in the end, it's not value added, because they weren't happy. They're not going to come back. For us, we want clients. First of all, it's work at the end of the day. For us, we do want our business to keep growing. But also, when you see someone you can help, you want them back, and you want them back in the long run. And that for me is that successful session, is when I know someone's happy and they want to come back, and I know that I can keep helping them get better. But it's always a trial and error. It never goes, not never, it's a different person. So sometimes the class will take a life of its own, and you have to adapt to that. And I think that's a challenge that we face as instructors. But that's kind of like the logic that I try to use with my clients. How about you? Where do you find yourself there?
Use the sandwich method. I love it. So I love using breathwork. I might just include a link on here too. There's a breathwork session that I do that it's single nostril breathing. So that starts to release the one side of the upper body, the sinuses, and I then do some twists on the one side. They're called book openings. They're called different things in different trainings. And then I have the clients sit up and close their eyes and feel the difference between the sides. I love working unilaterally, especially on the first session, depending on the client. Sometimes it can be a bit confronting when clients have fear or they've been injured, so that I wouldn't work too much unilateral stuff, but breathwork would certainly be able to be helpful. And balance work. So allowing them to feel the wobbles on one side, but then feel the stability on the other side. We'll talk about words and descriptions in another chat as well, but never describing that to them, but allowing them to notice and observe the patterns that they may have and feel between the sides. And something as simple as that is just, it's always surprising clients with how breathwork can change how they feel. It is always surprising feeling the difference between the strength in sides. And And also explaining it. So you touched on it with communicating with your client before it happens, so that they don't feel like they're breaking, they don't start panicking, and they don't feel alone with what is going on with my body. And then creating that fear is going to also cause them not to come back. So creating a safe container for them to understand that there may be some things that'll come up. One side may not feel as stable, not naming exactly which one, but just helping them to understand that this is what the body does. And if they wobble, this is why. And this is what we're going to work towards. So when they feel the difference in balance work and in breath work, then I start to describe what plan we are going to go forward with, because we've now mapped their movement, we've mapped their breath in a way, and started to see, it's a little bit stuck on this part of the body. This side is needing a little bit more connection. And I just start to describe the plan ahead. And they don't feel as overwhelmed. They feel equipped with, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's like a recipe to a really good cake.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I'm interested. So when we're talking about like the different, and even touching back on the previous topic that we were looking at, finding the ideal client, in this case scenario, have you ever had someone that walked into your studio or walked into a class with you that wasn't your ideal client? And I'm just curious, I know we may be going off topic, but I would really love to hear if you've had such an experience and how you may have handled it, where you just know that what they're looking for is maybe not where you want to be going with their training program, and how you approach that.
This is a great question. I once had a client who was, I guess at that stage, he was in his 50s, and he is an adventurer. So he climbs mountains. He doesn't believe in stretching. He loves running with the weights and the heavy bag that they hike with. Hip flexors are on all the time, and refuses to do any light weights, and has never wanted a female trainer. So that was one of my clients, who ended up actually being one of my best clients, because when I introduced light load weights for his arms and just doing really light weights, he was just shocked at how it helped him to connect in a different way. So that was a really fun time for me when I turned around his thought patterns on who's training him and what I may look like, and the fact that I'm not his ideal that he thinks, to him absolutely coming twice a week for many years. I think it was 5 or 6
That's
years, but then I
fantastic.
immigrated. So that was one of them. But then there have been certain clients that they don't, there was a point where I knew we were just not meant to work together. Why?
What happened during that session?
Because every piece of advice I would give, they wouldn't take. They wouldn't follow my advice. They would carry on doing what they were doing, and also not get checked out and aligned by professionals. So they would have flare-ups, and I was concerned for their safety. And I said, it is a risk, because we don't know if your nervous system's under stress or you have a disc bulge. We need to know what is going on deeper. And that was a case where I had to decide and have a difficult conversation of, maybe I'm not the instructor for you. I didn't say it as that. Like, what I had said was, I prefer to maybe not risk your safety I would feel better for you as a client, for you to go somewhere where they are able to align you and work with you in a way that you believe is more relatable for your experience. And that's basically what I did. It wasn't, I generally haven't had to do that. But when it came to safety, I chose to keep the clients safe, because at the end of the day, I just would not feel right teaching someone when I know they are going to be going and doing some forward folds when I think they might have a disc bulge. And it's the last thing I need to have is a client phone me and say, oh, even though like I actually had catered for a potential disc bulge, just secretly not saying it out loud, but just keeping it on the safe side. But yeah, it got to the stage where it just seemed to be a little bit better for both of us. And I used to just start to feel so drained whenever I knew the client was coming, and I was not able to speak my truth or be able to teach through my values openly. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned it. And I think what you said is super important. And I think that's actually what makes you a really great instructor as well. Just hearing the way that you're speaking about this topic, because it is so important, I think, for us as instructors to also be able to separate ourselves from a client that we feel we're not going to bring value to. And I say this why, and this is something I've really learned as a trial and error, especially in when you're trying to address people with certain pains. And this may sound horrible, and I don't want it to sound horrible, but you can't help someone who maybe doesn't want to help themselves. So when you're talking to someone, and there's so many cases where I'll be like, hey, look, sessions are going great. I'm seeing a few things like I don't diagnose. It's not my job to diagnose. So it'd be really great if you saw a professional, and then I would love to speak with a professional afterwards, you know, your physio, your osteo, whoever. Just go check these things out, and I'd love to chat with them after so I can better your program. And most of the time, the clients will appreciate that. But I think everyone in their, you know, Pilates instructor journey will find the client who'll be like, no, I've tried it all, nothing helps. I just do this, I follow this online. And at the end of the day, it's not that you're not going to bring value to them. You may, but they're not willing to listen. And they're not willing to keep exploring. And I've told this, I have so many clients that I've seen, and they've been like, oh, I've seen physios and osteos, they don't help. And for me, you have to understand, it's never so much the profession, it's always the individual. So you'll have, you know, great physios, great osteos, and you'll have not great physios and not great osteos. Same with a Pilates instructor, same with any fitness coach. You have to find the person that works for you. That's what I tell the client. And I sometimes have to explain to them, I may not be that person. And if you're not willing to, you know, go and keep exploring your pain, then I may not be the person that you should be working with, because I will not rest or I will not ignore a pain point that we have identified strongly. It's not going to be like, oh, let's see how it goes. No, you need to check that out before we move forward. Because at the end of the day, again, you have to think about yourself as an instructor. I think to offer value, you have to start from yourself. If you don't stop yourself there, or if you're not able to separate yourself from a client like that, if they get injured, they're going to point the finger at you. No matter how many times you said, go check this out. If you're not able to say, look, maybe I'm not the right person for you, because for me, this is really important, and I can't put past this pain point without knowing more about it from your doctor, because I won't diagnose it myself. I cannot, I don't have the means to. When they get injured, somebody with that kind of mentality that says, oh, that physio doesn't work, oh, this doesn't work, and say, oh, that Pilates instructor didn't work. And at the end of the day, you're doing not just them a disservice, but yourself a disservice too. And you're going to be in a point where you're like, oh, I knew, but you're not going to fight the client, right? And then at the end of the day, you're just going to just be like, okay, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true that if they see another professional and they say, oh, you need to do Pilates, they're going to say, oh, Pilates didn't work. Pilates hurt me. And that is just where the whole snowball starts. Also, when giving her advice, I said it verbally, but I also ensured, especially when it's safety concerns, that I emailed her my advice so that it was in writing. It was something I could refer back to. And it was something that if anything was to go on, I was at least covered, that I had advised this, she was aware, and I did advise it a few times. So
that's a really
I
good
wouldn't
point. You do have to protect yourself a little bit as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a really interesting chat, isn't it? So I'm loving spending time with you.
Same.
Yeah, so as an instructor, I hope that this has helped you. And Mila and I have got a few other chats coming up. We will be posting these up and also letting you know when others are coming. I think it's going to be weekly from Monday next week. So yeah, I do have a download called 5 Things Every New Instructor Needs to Know. So the link will be on here for you to be able to click on, and then I'll also include that breath work. We'll also be talking about Mila's amazing program that's going to be coming up soon. It is live, and I think, did you want to touch on that, or should we talk about that?
We can talk about that in the coming topics.
Yeah.
I would love to talk a little bit more, but I think we'll get to that.
Yeah, totally. So Mila's got a beautiful app coming up with workouts, and it's a really personalized program. So yes, tune in for the next chat where we will be diving in even deeper. And thank you for your time. And thank you, Mila. It's great to talk to you all the way in Switzerland, and I'm all the way in Australia.
Yeah, actually, that's why it's so dark on my side, is that the
Yeah.
day is just starting for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
thank you so much, Claudia, for